Great. So once again, Arturo, thank you so much for joining Workforce Planning Hamilton, as well as the Hamilton Youth Workforce, regarding, just getting a better understanding of youth and employment in the Hamilton region. So this is a one-on-one interview between Workforce Planning Hamilton and YouthCAN to just get a better understanding of youth advocacy from your point of view. So we'll be just going through a series of questions, as well as just being able to get a overview of your organization and the things that you're currently doing in the Hamilton region. We are funded in part by the Ministry of Labor Training and Skills, as well as the province of Ontario. So we can just get right into it. And I will ask you your first question. So just tell me a little bit more about yourself and the organization you work for.
Yeah, so my name is Arturo Jimenez. I'm the film studio coordinator at Center 3, as well as the YouthCAN project coordinator. A little bit about YouthCAN, and then I'll talk about our backbone agency, Center 3, because that's the people that do all our admin stuff and whatnot. YouthCAN is a collective impact group, meaning that we represent the interests of multiple organizations in Hamilton to lower the NEET youth rate, which means the not in employment, education, or training. We do that in a variety of ways, but our main aims are to increase the capacity of these kinds of young people and service providers as well as employers. This year, because of COVID, a lot of things changed in how we administer these sort of services, but we focused most on increasing the capacity of young people as well as service providers. And hopefully in the new year, fingers crossed that things open up a little bit, and we'll focus on that EDI sort of area with employers. But that's that for YouthCAN. I'm gonna talk a little bit about Center 3 because we deal a lot with this kind of service provider sort of area in terms of employment, especially for youth. We have a few programs like Shift, which is a soft skills training program where we offer developing soft skills for young people with creative projects. Because of COVID, normally we would do this in person where we have like stop motion and stuff and things like painting and other creative things. But we created a bunch of like online modules to distribute to different service providers in Hamilton and the Ontario region in general, to increase this sort of thing. So that's Shift. We have 360 for Youth, which is aimed towards graduates of post-secondary education that want to get into the creative fields. So we have a OT with St. Joe's that helps us with managing maybe some of the barriers that these young people face. And we get them placements in creative jobs, and that could range from a bunch of things, but we get a lot of success with the marketing side of the equation when it comes to the private sector. And then last but certainly not least, we have an alternative education program called New Steel in Center 3, where it's a recognized art schism, which is a great achievement for us. And we have Hamilton Wentworth District School Board staff helping us with helping these like at-risk youth participate in a creative environment, and we're able to help them go into the workforce with some experience in-house with our t-shirt printing. So whenever you buy some t-shirts at Center 3 Tees, we're helping a bunch of vulnerable youth get that sort of job experience and provide a industry standard professional kind of product for whatever needs you need. So that's the general question one. Hopefully I didn't ramble too much.
No, that's great. I think with Hamilton Youth Workforce, our ultimate goal is to get a better understanding of youth and employment, and also seeing what other organizations are doing. So you've really been able to give us a great overview of some of the things that are happening with Center 3 and the programs that go along with that. And I think that really just jumps into almost the next question as well. What are some of the successes of your organization regarding youth in the Hamilton region?
Yeah, so this is where my bullet points come in. I think first and foremost, persisting despite this time, I think is a success. We can't really downplay that. I know you probably experienced it, like everything changed. Like most of the items on my grant proposal were literally impossible to achieve. So like just trying to figure out how to adapt and administer these services to these groups was a feat in and of itself. But thankfully, I have more points than just that because we did get up to a lot this year. The one that I'm personally proud of is maintaining and developing new relationships despite everything being online. So with workforce planning, your space with Path Employment, we really developed great relationships. And there's this sense of centralized services throughout Hamilton, which is really exciting. Next, but also not lesser important to that, is we completed a very extensive iterative test with McMaster University to test our online platform. Specifically, we wanted to create an online platform with a lot of EDI considerations. So what does applying online equitably look like? And we're able to complete that. So we tested a number of youth and we're able to financially compensate them for their time to create this new sort of job board, I guess you would say, but more on that in a bit. We also were able to document and champion the voices of over 40 youth in a variety of different ways. I mentioned the test, but we also did a lot of online video content creation where we had a youth roundtable with your space. We got a bunch of youth to come in and help us in a variety of different roles, whether it's a data analyst or not data analyst, data entry assistant, things like that. And people to teach youth how to do things like create resumes with Path Employment and stuff like that. It's something that I believe is probably the shining achievement, just helping not only those 40 youth participate and get their voices heard, but give them opportunities and offer referrals and get them in the space so we're able to talk with them and figure out what their personal needs are. So maybe we have a reference for them or give them a better understanding of what kind of roles and jobs and opportunities are out there. I think that was probably our best thing this year.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that overview. And I love the fact that there are so many different community partnerships that are happening just as a success. And you know, I think with COVID-19, I think there's a lot of different back and forth of unsureness that's happening. So once again, like Hamilton Youth Workforce, we are looking to create a community-wide strategy to support the high youth unemployment rates, but it's been difficult over COVID. So I think that leads me to that next question of what are some of the barriers and challenges that your organization has experienced in 2021 and 2020, I guess, as a whole?
Yeah, for sure. So it's super interesting because I started work at Center 3, I believe, beginning of 2020 as like a contract employee. And I was entering this sort of service provider sort of role where I was basically given a list of connections and no way of physically meeting people. So that was a really tough thing. Learning names and all this stuff through emails and Zoom was like a consistently difficult thing for me to do because I'm overall extroverted and adapting to this both in an administrative kind of lens and like a service provider role, especially for something that's so like interpersonal with youth was consistently difficult. Other things that we struggled with, of course, I mentioned before, adapting all of the programming and proposed programming to this online world was incredibly difficult. A lot of the things that we normally do were just simply impossible to achieve, like in-person classes, following up with people, giving 360 supports in some of our programs at Center 3. It just wasn't safe during COVID. Maintaining relationships with other service providers was really difficult too. There's a lot of people that, especially the first couple of waves of the pandemic, just weren't at their battle stations, so to speak. And it was really disheartening. Weeks spent no emails, no replies to people that I know we corresponded with so much before I entered my role. So that was a pretty disappointing thing. Once again, it's such a feat to persist in this like super difficult time. Of course, it's hard to pat yourself on the back when we feel that emptiness almost in the community. And one thing that was consistent, because I do deal with youth a lot, is navigating and understanding youth perspectives in this new online world where there's a lot of alternative messaging. That's something we'll talk about a little bit more, but there's a lot of, as service providers, we're kind of in this position where we're trying to figure out ways to help that's like that people would appreciate. And it's hard to do that when a lot of people are pining for this demographic's attention. And sometimes it's productive, sometimes it's not. So it's really tough. But I'm sure we'll talk about it. I think our next question, we can dive deeper.
There's, you know what, you really made a good point of, you know, a lot of people are trying to, and, you know, Workforce Planning Hamilton, we've seen that a huge priority is youth unemployment rates. With these high unemployment rate numbers, we knew that there was something that needed to be done, which is why we created this platform. But you said that, you know, some of these outreach opportunities have been successful, some of them have not been. Would you be able to just give maybe a little bit more of a description of what are some of the things that were successful and some things that maybe, you know, for passing it on to other organizations, some things that may not be as successful or, you know, as productive, I would say.
Yeah, sure. So the nitty gritty of that would be mainly retention of the clientele. Yeah. So it's so difficult online where we have at-risk youth or youth that are more susceptible to barriers, really form that connection and trust with you when you're on the other end of a webcam. And that is exacerbated by this growing disenchantment, discontentment with service providing and traditional education streams and work in general. Like, it's such an uphill battle in that respect. I know there was a lot of Zoom, what's it called? Zoom conferences where we talked about how even financial incentives for a lot of these programming opportunities were not successful. I think the HRIC, I think they're called, Hamilton Region Indian Center, had rooms full of like TVs and like free gear and stuff like that, that normally they were successful to facilitate programming, but much like us too, like even providing financial compensation, we had to really figure out, okay, what's an equitable amount? We have to increase basically the amounts we compensate youth, because it was difficult to get that engagement and get that retention. That was the main thing. Yeah. So yeah, that's how we tried to navigate that. But of course, it's like a different world from before. I have lists of events that we held that were almost like drop-in events that people attended. And it's so hard to make that same thing happen because we can't provide food. We can't provide a space for young people to just like create or do stuff like that because it's simply not allowed. And like when we want to get people in to do like a Zoom call and stuff like that, it's so tough to navigate. Okay, there's this young person on the other side that is already suspicious of our industry, and how do we form that connection and trust with them through a computer screen? It's almost impossible, but we're trying to make it work.
Absolutely. And I think that we've all had our experiences with trying to have those connections through Zoom or through any online platform at this point. And I think as we continue on with this pandemic, I think we're getting better with it. But based off of your just based off of your experience, what are some of the ways that, are better ways to connect with youth and regarding employment as a whole, or just regarding, that trust between organization and advocacy for youth?
Yeah, so there's a few things that, like, the main guiding mantra of this past year, I guess, was
Mhm.
meet youth where they are, right? So we can't um, we can't expect to have like a traditional method of administering services just work in these like unprecedented times. So really getting on social media and being able to compete with um, people with that are just well versed of using that sort of media, whether it's like TikTok, for instance, or Instagram. Like we have to really up our game in general, because we want that almost like production value to validate our messaging. And it's tough, especially with, I feel like the nonprofit sector in general is an aging population. And when we deal with youth engagement, we really have to be careful with, okay, why, like, we're making web pages that look a little bit outdated, that look like you're going to get a virus or something like that. We can't expect that to make a young person come in and do a workshop there. Or if your video isn't up to snuff, it's easier for a young person on their own volition to consume content for pleasure instead of do something to help their personal or professional development. I think that's the main thing. Meet youth where they are and really focus on the whole media production aspect or production quality aspect, because those peripheral things might not seem that important, especially when we're offering opportunities and services, but it's the main thing to drive online engagement. And I think we have yet, as a nonprofit sector in general, really capitalized on that technique, basically.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And I love the fact that you've said meet youth where they are, because I think our expectation as organizations are for youth to come to us. And that's not necessarily the case, right? We know that we need to build that trust in some type of capacity. So going to them and saying, hey, these are the opportunities that we have. Would you be interested? Is maybe a little bit more of a open arms approach rather than it being, here's the Zoom link, come meet us, for some people that
Yeah.
you haven't even met before. So I think that kind of just leads me into the next question of what are some of the industries that you've noticed right now during 2021, 2022, regarding what youth are interested in going to? So the industries that youth are interested in applying for.
Mm-hmm. Um, it's almost like a two-sided answer. The first one is because we're in the creative sector at Center 3, a lot of our clientele and the people that come to us are creative individuals and they want a creative job. And everybody has an art Instagram and everybody has personal aspirations. But I was surprised that a lot of youth actually understand that right now they need to take survival jobs. A lot of people are interested in comparing different like part-time roles and seeing what kind of benefits and stuff they can get from these sort of opportunities. But in general, I get the sense too from personal connections that a lot of people in this industry want to know that the job they get into has linear progression, or not linear progression, but any type of upwards progression that's somehow related to the creative sector. But that might just be because we're at Center 3 on James Street, a very artsy place, so we attract that kind of clientele. But yeah, I think in general, in a very basic sense, outside of applying for like, I think you coined it involuntary part-time or survival jobs or something like that. Besides that, young people just want to know that they'll have a career trajectory.
Absolutely.
In general, roles like that are important.
Yeah. So it's just understanding that, there is, if you are in this role, there's a capacity to almost like that career laddering, right? Where there's a potential to have more as you continue to invest your time within this organization. So What are some of the hiring strategies at this point that you guys have been using in regards to outreaching to youth? And have there been successes or any barriers regarding hiring youth as a whole?
So I'm in a pretty unique position. Um, as a young person, I'm 24 years old, so I'm right smack dab in the middle of a youth, somebody who qualifies as a youth in the eyes of whoever makes these demographic distinctions. I don't do much youth hiring, but for all the roles at YouthCAN, we only hire youth. So I personally hired a data entry assistant, different youth to stand in for videos and present online. Um, are you asking more for like a technical thing so other service providers can find these sort of young
Yeah,
people?
absolutely. So like what, as an organization that is hiring youth right now,
Mhm.
have you seen any successes regarding, some ways of, outreaching to youth to hire them,
I
or
see.
some of the barriers that regarding, hiring youth at this moment?
I think just like the engagement and the whole retention piece, it's super difficult now. I think any young person that I was able to hire or even get in the room for just contributing to a conversation or things like that, it was either through a personal connection or a connection to a partner agency like Your Space, for instance, where they had a lot of young people either volunteering or participating on like a contractual basis that were able to help and collaborate with us. And people that I hired personally were simply because I'm a young person in Hamilton and I know a few people in similar roles to me. So it's
Yeah.
easy for me to hit up a bunch of people and ask if they want an opportunity because I know exactly where they are. And I think that's really indicative to like another issue or barrier is we just simply need more youth representation in this sort of sector because when you hire a 20-year-old or a 24-year-old or whatever, they have personal connections and they just know in an embodied way a lot of um, these sort of struggles and even connections if you need a role filled or something like that. Um, of course, that's not like a silver bullet sort of answer, but I think it's important to I think meet youth where they are again. Like we
Yeah.
need to um, go to the college career fairs, the university career fairs, and things like that, and really seek out these individuals so they can be in these sort of positions.
Absolutely. I think that there's this overview of, us wanting youth to invest time, but I think from our standpoint, we also as organizations need to invest more time in youth, and as you said, go to where they are. So whether if it's through these job opportunities or job fair, career fair opportunities, I think that's where we need to go. So I
Mm-hmm.
think that in itself is some of the successes and also some of the barriers, right? So we see that
Mm-hmm.
word of mouth, as you just mentioned, is one of the top ways to really connect with youth, because it's like if you're hiring someone that is in that age category, they obviously have friends of a friend of a friend who may also need that type of work. So kind of reaching out in that type of capacity might be helpful. So I think this has been a really great conversation, and I love the fact that there's been so many key elements just within the last 20 minutes of having this conversation, because as you said, meet with youth where they are, and having that word of mouth connection and having that invest of time is always going to be the key way of connecting with you. So as a whole, what advice would you give youth and other organizations when dealing with employment?
So I'll mainly focus on youth. I think um, the main thing that I really want young people to do is access services, ask questions. We have this tendency, and I had this issue with a lot of young people this year, where they look at a program that might be a good fit, might not, and they're like, "Oh, I don't qualify because of this," and that's not how the nonprofit sector works, right? We try to refer you to other people that we know or other programs and stuff like that. And no question's a bad question. There's literally people that they get paid to do this and they'll help you. So ask questions, send an email out, check your email often. That's probably the best. Yeah, 100%. Also, don't be discouraged and embarrassed about accessing your personal support system, especially for employment. There's no shame in that. There's a lot of rhetoric out there that dissuades young people from taking a job with their parents or taking a job here. And especially, it's a tough time where there's not a lot of, I guess, gainful opportunities. So don't feel, I guess, embarrassed from taking them when you have them. I think that's a huge thing, especially when your parents might be involved in like the education sector or something like that. You shouldn't feel dissuaded from accessing those things. And a huge thing too is young people, and I witness it all the time, they're insanely skillful and talented at different things, and they don't have the means to translate these skills to employers. So we have to figure out how to help youth promote these sort of skills in a traditional professional sense, to help them gain employment that they feel that's meaningful. I know a lot of people that are really talented in the media arts in general, and they don't know the kind of roles they can apply for with that sort of skill set. So I think that's a huge thing for service providers to focus on as well. Like how, like these young people have a skill set that our industry desperately needs. We need to figure out how to make online content. We have to figure out how to make something more authentic to young people. And the only way to do that is to involve young people that are skilled in these sorts of senses. So we have to be more proactive with finding these individuals online and learning the Hamilton community, especially in a creative sense. Like, what does that look like as service providers? What can we look for in that sense? And yeah, also access, if you want a meaningful employment opportunity, you could always look into the trades. There's so many organizations in Hamilton that offer help and financial assistance with getting equipment and paid training to do the trades. There's no shame in doing the trades. A lot of successful young people that I know are in the trades and they're doing super well, almost affording houses well. And it's kind of crazy. So
it's a career path that a lot of people, a lot of youth, also need to realize is also reality. So I completely love that point as well. Sorry, I could completely cut you off. Continue.
No worries, no worries. Yeah, that was my last point. And we thankfully, throughout doing the YouthCAN stuff, I made a lot of videos that document some of these perspectives. So that trades angle, I guess, we actually interviewed a young person who was able to find success in the trades. They're really struggling with the typical high school to university route, and they said, enough's enough. I want to get into the trades. And they went from struggling at home to not knowing their direction to getting a car and saving for a house and like doing the things that a lot of young people today love doing, like playing video games and stuff like that. And they're able to find that freedom through the trades. And I feel like it's a thing we have to really promote, because it's the answer for a lot of people. They just don't know it.
Absolutely. And I think that wraps up the Hamilton Youth Workforce conversation. And I would love to thank you, Arturo, for being a part of this and being the first one to be willing to have this one-on-one session to discuss youth and employment in the Hamilton region. So thank you, Art, for being a part of this, as well as YouthCAN and Center 3. And thank you for everything that you've done in the Hamilton community so far. It's been, your organization is awesome, and I love the fact that you found ways to connect with youth in a way that is meaningful and impactful. So I think that overall is the goal for what we all want to do when regarding working with you. So we'll leave it at that. I think the next action piece is to invite YouthCAN to be a part of the larger conversation. So the Hamilton Youth Workforce and Workforce Planning Hamilton is conducting a community roundtable event discussing youth and employment in Hamilton. So we would love to have you speak on today's topics and anything else that you have regarding youth and employment in Hamilton, and really being able to showcase your organization and the work that you're currently doing. So we would love to have you be a part of that, and have those prompting moments where it's like, okay, we need some other people to chat a little bit more. So I think that would be a perfect opportunity for you to showcase the organization YouthCAN and Center 3. So we'll leave it at that. And once again, thank you for being a part of the conversation. Yay!
Yeah, for sure. Thanks so much.